Welcome back to the Maple Realty Show. And today, me and Roman, we're going to discuss 10 steps to sell your home. So, what would you suggest step number one is, Roman? Or is there anything we need to keep in mind beforehand?
I would keep in mind that there could be more, there could be less steps depending on your situation, but these are probably the most common 10-step process to give a fundamental idea of selling your house if you're planning to sell your house. So step one would be, uh, in most cases, pretty obvious, evaluate your goals. So decide why you're selling, whether you're upsizing, downsizing, relocating, or cashing out, and determine your timeline for selling and know your financial goals, including how much you want to net after paying mortgage fees and taxes. So I think that's a very important point because a lot of times sellers will object about commission, like for realtors, but what matters most is how much you're going to net after all the fees, more so than what you're paying in the fees, if that makes sense. Would you agree with that?
No, of course. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's the smartest way to look at it because it helps prevent any unintended mistakes that could be really, really costly. Because if things don't align and they don't go as according to plan, for example, if things don't close on time and maybe because you thought you had funds and you didn't, or anything can happen, and then you were supposed to get another property to move into, but that's dependent on you selling your property, then it can get pretty hairy and it's better to avoid that. I think this would help.
So step number two would be research the market. So usually, obviously, a good agent will help you with that, but you want to study the recent sales in your area, see what's sold, understand similarities so you can compare your property to others. Of course, from a seller's perspective, you always usually think your home's better, but it's good to go in with an open mind and just really look at the comparables and see the similarities and the differences and why one may have sold more than another home and vice versa, and identify the current market conditions because depending on the time of the year, that could dictate the market conditions, whether it's fall or spring or winter or summer. And then, of course, whether or not it's actually a buyer's market or a seller's market. Do you have anything else to add for that?
I think that sums it up pretty well.
So we got step one, evaluate your goals. Step two, research the market. And then step three, which is always fun, get your home ready. So declutter and deep clean and depersonalize. What do you
Yes.
think about depersonalizing? Because sometimes people keep their family photos up and their personal belongings if they're living in the home. Um, it might be a little harder to depersonalize.
In my opinion, I think just do the best you can and depersonalize as much as you can reasonably without stressing yourself too much. I think during the previous market when it was a seller's market, you didn't need to do it as much. But now I would suggest you take every advantage you can. So depersonalize as much as possible. But if you can't get space or storage, don't stress too much.
At the very least, maybe like pictures, I would say.
Oh, yes. I would definitely remove any identifying pictures. And also, I would remove it because sometimes, like when we get showings, people's spouses aren't there or their family members, and they want to take pictures or videos so that they could show their spouse to get approval to even place an offer on the
That's
place. So
that's
I
a
would
really
say
good point.
depersonalize.
And what do you think? What's your thoughts on repairs? Because a lot of sellers, when they're getting their homes ready, um, I've been in the experience of one extreme to the other, where they want to fix everything, every little thing that's going on in the house, paint it, do this, do that, and then others are like, God, just sell it as is.
It depends on what it is. For something like painting, I think it's almost always worth it to paint the place because the walls are basically like 50% of what you see.
That's a
And
good point.
if a new, like, yeah, and
Maybe
if,
even more.
and maybe more. So, and painting is a lot cheaper than changing the flooring. So, or I would assume anyway. Yeah.
And then the
I
last tip,
don't think you, yeah, go ahead.
no, finish it.
I don't think, like fixing every little thing, um, is a great idea, but I also think in the current market, fix all the major things.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. Because I find most buyers, typically they want to make the home their own anyways. So once they buy it, they're
exactly.
usually going to do whatever they want to do in it anyways. So it's a fine balance between spending too much money, um, and not spending enough money to make your house presentable, obviously. So I would think, yeah, repairs are good, but it's situational for sure. And then the last point for getting your home ready is staging. I think in most cases, a seller could typically stage it with just the items they have. And I think that would be more than sufficient enough,
Mm, I don't know. I've seen some good stagers.
yeah,
I think it's a case by case basis, to be honest.
depending on, I guess, the style and everything. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think about virtual staging? It seems pretty effective. A lot of people start their search online. So,
Yeah. I don't know. Personally, like, I don't know how well it works in the market, but for myself, I don't really trust virtual staging too much because a lot of times I just don't think the dimensions of what they put in the pictures make sense. They somehow magically managed to squeeze in like a bed and a couch and all of these things, but I'm like, there's no way there's enough space for that.
so
So,
it'd have to be pretty realistic then for you to. I've
yes.
seen some where I agree with what you're saying for sure. It's like a hack job. You could clearly see it was virtual staged. And then I've seen others that you cannot even tell.
Well, I think some are really good, but what I like the most is when there's a blank stage, blank stage, blank stage, so you can see both.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what
That
I
is a
mean?
good idea. Yeah, I agree. So step 4 is hire a real estate professional. So typically sellers I find interview 2 to 3 agents and check their track record. But in most cases I find that usually people just go with who they know and who they trust, right? I think real estate is a very trusting business. It's a big decision. You're dealing with a big financial decision, and I think it's very important to connect with someone that you obviously discuss and will offer you the right services based on the commission and what fits your needs. And a good agent will honestly price your home and market it and guide you through negotiations. Is there anything that you would be concerned about when people are interviewing an agent or a specific brokerage, maybe?
To be honest, I don't know because I think most people just go with the agent, and I don't know that many people that know a lot about brokerages in general.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say just be careful if you interview 2 or 3 agents, and let's say, typically speaking, from our experience, an average commission is 5% plus HST, which gets split between the buyer side 2.5% and the seller side 2.5%. I'd be a little wary with the agent that comes in and says, "We'll do it all for 1%," because where are they cutting back, right?
I agree. I didn't that didn't come to my head, but you're right.
And are
That
they
makes
even
sense.
doing it full time? A lot of agents don't necessarily do this full time, which could impact a lot within the negotiations when you're dealing with other agents. I would just be wary of that.
Yeah.
And then also on the other extreme, I've seen some offer more than the typical, like they'll say, oh, we charge 6% or 7%, and they're listing all these items that you don't necessarily even really need. Because at the end of the day, the market's going to dictate the price. And if there's a buyer there, they're going to buy your house. But obviously, there's some tips and tools to use to maximize that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, step number 5, we're already halfway done. So step number 5, determine your home's value. So this is when you really want to conduct a comparative market analysis with your agent and decide on a listing price. So deciding on a listing price could be very tricky because you got to find a balance between it, like attracting buyers with your maximum return and not scaring off buyers, right? So you want to maybe consider leaving room for negotiation would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I don't have
I
anything to add.
I think with pricing your home, for me personally, I never like to underlist it so drastically. If you've done a proper comparative market analysis and let's say your home's worth $1 million, I think it's silly to list it for 699.
Yeah,
I think you're just wasting time with potentially getting a bunch of offers that aren't going to be within your range anyways. So I'd rather quality over quantity basically is what I'd rather have.
I agree. I think for a large portion, it depends on the market, and the current market, it's not going to work. I didn't even like it in the previous market. I think something close to what it's actually worth, maybe slightly less, but not too far from what it's worth.
That's my go-to as well. Pretty much what it's worth or slightly less. But again, you're right, it does depend on the market because for for instance, I was dealing with a friend who I helped buy a condo a few years ago, and now he wants to sell it. So as we know, it's a pretty big buyer's market for condos, and he was worried if we priced it too low because we're in a buyer's market for condos and because the I guess maybe psychological aspect of consumers buying condos right now is the thought in mind that they're going to most likely get the condo for less than what it's listed for. So he was worried if we list it too low, then a buyer is going to come in knowing it's a buyer's market and offer even less.
Yeah, but that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So I
But I
don't think
think
that's,
it's more likely to it's definitely more likely to happen in a buyer's market. So especially in a buyer's market, I'd want to be as close to the price you want as possible, assuming that maybe most buyers are going to try to undercut you.
yeah. And once again, like this specific um, recommendation, I think it should also be taken on a case by case basis. For
For sure.
example, if the property is nice and it's actually like quite desirable, even if it's a condo or whatever, I think then I would list it slightly above what I want just so that they come down. But
Yeah.
overall, I would say in general, I would list it at what it's worth or slightly less.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
I would
I don't even know if I would only really list it slightly less if I'm just more worried about it not selling at all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. Depending on the condition, maybe location could have an impact. That makes sense.
Exactly.
That's a good point. Okay, so we're halfway done. So step one was evaluate your goals. Step two, research the market. Step three, get your home ready. Step four, hire a real estate professional. Step five, determine your home's value. And then step six, market your home. So I like to do professional photos and sometimes videos or virtual tours. And then I think the best way for maximum exposure is the MLS because that goes to realtor.ca as well. And then social media could be a big tool as well. I find that that's been pretty helpful. And then determine whether or not you want to do open houses, schedule private showings, and highlight as many of your home's unique features and upgrades as possible, of course.
So I would suggest, I agree with everything, and I would like to highlight the open houses. I think they can be really beneficial, and generally when you can have them, especially in like this kind of market, because the only people that are going to open houses are people that are pretty serious right now. And if you can get some people to come see your place, that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten to see it, that's a big advantage in trying to sell your home.
That's true. Yeah. And I think there's obviously going to be always a small percentage of people that are just walking in to walk in. Maybe they're nosing neighbors or whatever, but it gets the wheels turning regardless in people's minds, right? So it might spark something to want to buy.
I agree. But like for example, I did an open house, I don't know, maybe last weekend or the weekend before, and it was quite snowy. and literally everyone that came, so I probably saw like 6 to 9 people or 9 sets of people.
Wow.
They were all pretty interested in getting a place. It was just, is this the right one type of attitude. Whereas during 2023, I used to see a lot of people just browsing, like window shopping.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, good. So step 7, review offers and negotiate. So this is always a fun part because sometimes you don't know, most times you don't know how many offers are going to come in. Sometimes you could kind of have an idea based on the market, but it's very hard to determine. Um, and depending on the market, you'd want to strategize either a set offer date. So maybe you list it on the MLS and it's a crazy seller's market. So you hold back offers until a week from now, let's say, or in a buyer's market, you might just want to keep it open, offers anytime, and just try to get the best offer to come in whenever it comes in. So you obviously want to review offers very carefully, the price, the contingencies, and closing timeline. Obviously, a good agent will help with that. And you don't want to just focus on the highest price. I think that's a big mistake that sometimes people get caught up in. They might see the price and be like, oh, this, like, I'm accepting this one right away. But they're not carefully considering the reliability of the potential buyers or any potential conditions, the size of the deposit, right? How maybe how the buyers got pre-approved. So there's a lot of factors that come into play with that. Would you have anything else to add, like in terms of reviewing offers, maybe something to carefully look for, or an
You
example,
can't
maybe?
think of anything. No, I don't have any specific examples.
I would say one maybe example. Obviously, your timeline would matter. So if you're looking for like a 2-month closing, and maybe someone wants to close in 6 months, that could be an issue. Also, let's say one buyer has a financing condition in their offer, but maybe they have a really large deposit, and then another buyer doesn't have a financing condition in their offer, but they have a very small deposit. Maybe that could be something to worry about
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of things to potentially worry
because you
about,
want to
maybe.
protect yourself if in the event something does go wrong as well, right? So,
Of course.
and then step 8, accept an offer, of course, and then enter the closing period. So once you accept an offer, the home enters into the closing period where the buyer completes any conditions that they may have, such as like a financing condition, make sure they secure it, and potentially a home inspection. And you may need to provide other documents depending on the situation. So it's important to stay in communication with the agent and the lawyer, and obviously um, on the buyer's end, they would be in communication with their mortgage broker, lawyer, and their agent as well. I think that's pretty straightforward. Step 8, accept an offer. Step 9 is completing any inspections or appraisals. So buyers often conduct a home inspection. So be prepared to negotiate repairs potentially. So let's say you're the type of seller that maybe didn't go around fixing everything, or maybe you mislooked something and you weren't aware of something. Be prepared uh, that the buyer might come back and try to negotiate that. A big common issue I find is with the attics. So sometimes a lot of people are living in their home and they never look in the attic. They never bothered to look in it. They don't know that there might be mold in the ceiling or the insulation might be very poorly done or there's signs of rodents um, or whatever the case is. So I find that could be a common issue from my experience when we do home inspections, that maybe something's wrong in the attic and now the buyer tries to negotiate that on the price or ask the seller if they could fix it because they still want the house really bad, but they just, um, weren't expecting an issue like that, right? So
Yeah, this is a side note. It's I just thought about it because you added the home inspection part. One of the things you could do when you're selling your home is you could actually do the home inspection yourself and have it available for buyers when they're purchasing. To be honest, I think that's something I would recommend because I feel like it would
That's a
speed up
great
the
point.
process for someone who's serious.
That's a great point. Especially if your timeline is tight as the seller and you want to sell quicker. That's a good point because it will speed up the process for sure. And obviously, if you use a reliable company that's well known in the area of your marketplace, then that could help too.
And it's the also the same thing for if you're selling a condo, maybe just purchasing the condo status certificate yourself beforehand and having that
In
available.
agreement. That's an excellent idea because a lot of times, uh, I noticed that buyers will even ask for the status certificate before they even make an offer, right? So let's say in a situation where you have a condo up for sale, but you're holding back offers for a week, but you have the status certificate available, then potential buyers that are interested could be reviewing that status certificate before the offer date. So then when they do come on offer date, and if they do, they could come with the best offer possible.
Yeah,
And it
and
saves
I think
time,
what
like
a
you're
lot of
saying.
people don't realize is essentially people put in these offers, these conditions where it's upon status certificate review, but then this extends the whole negotiating process because it takes like 5 to 10 business days to get the status certificate in the first place. So if you're a seller with a tight timeline, I would just skip it, order it yourself beforehand, and be prepped and
Yeah.
prepared.
And when you get the status certificate early, you could see if there's any potential red flags yourself, and then how you could go about handling that situation. And then
For certain.
final 10, 10 step process. So step number 10 is close the sale. So sign any final documents at closing, including transferring the deed, pay off mortgages and closing costs, hand over the keys, and leave your home clean and ready for the new owners, and celebrate that your home is sold.
Yay.
Yeah. Any thing to add for closing the sale?
Nothing I can
Maybe
think about.
uh maybe if you're depending what your situation is, you might already have a home that you bought, but if you don't have a home, uh, you know, you might want to step on the gas a little in terms of finding another home. But that's something you should prepare probably before you even put your home up for sale, is what you're going to do after you sell the home, right? Which would also dictate what type of closing and timeline that you need to put as well.
Yes.
So, extra tips for first time sellers: always price realistically because overpricing can prolong your sale, and it will prolong the sale anytime you price a home. Usually, if your home's sitting on the market for a very, very long time, it's usually because it's almost always because it's overpriced, unless there's just a crazy amount of supply um, in the market. Again, and that would mean your place is overpriced for that time period. And curb appeal matters, of course. So you want to make first impressions outside count as much as the inside. So even in the winter, a couple days ago we got that crazy snowfall. Make sure it's shoveled. Make sure the path's clear. Make sure they could see the full driveway. I went to a showing the other day, and it was covered with snow. And my clients were scratching their heads regarding the parking because they couldn't figure out how many cars fit in the parking spot because it was all covered by snow. So we couldn't see the lines. So it took us a bit extra time to kind of scoop the snow out of the way and try to visualize how the cars would fit. That was a big deal for them. And then the
Fun
last tip
stuff.
I'd say is yeah. The last tip I'd say is keep communication open with your agent. Ask lots of questions. They're there to guide you. They're there to help you. That's why you're hiring them. So use it as a tool to help you.
Sounds good. Those
So
were
I
some
guess
great tips.
just to recap, I guess 10-step process to selling your home for a first time seller. So step 1, evaluate your goals. Step 2, research the market. Step 3, get your home ready. Step 4, hire a real estate professional. Step 5, determine your home's value. Step 6, market your home. Step 7, review offers and negotiate. Step 8, accept an offer and enter the closing period. Step 9, complete any inspections or appraisals on the buyer's end. And then step 10, close the sale. Is there any steps that you think you would add or maybe that were missed?
No, other than just have, for example, that status certificate available or home inspection available beforehand. That's all.
So I guess we would add that on getting your home ready. I guess I would add that
Exactly.
there. Yeah. So step number
Exactly.
3, get your home ready. Yeah. Okay, cool.
All
Well, I
right.
think that's
And how would they contact you, Roman, if they want to purchase or sell their home?
so you could contact me directly on my cell phone number, which we could provide maybe in a description. My website, romanspada.com, or our office, Real Estate Homeward Brokerage, located at 1858 Queen Street East in Toronto. You can find me on Instagram at Roman Spada, on YouTube. Contact me any outlet you can find me at, anytime, anywhere. I'll answer pretty quickly.
That's true. All right, guys. This was a great episode. Have a great week. Au revoir.
And we'll see